Okay, now let's talk about this priest called Abiah. Abiah was the eighth priest, it tells us in chapter 24 of First Chronicles. Now, let's do the math. When exactly is the eighth week of service, which is Abiah's week, which is Abiah's course, the course of Abiah? Now, earlier we said that Passover would start around April 14th and end around April the 21st. So the first high priest, which is high priest number 1, would start his week of service sometime at April the 21st, and he would end it on April the 28th. The second priest would end his service for the third guy to take over. The second priest would end his service on May the 5th. Now keep in mind these dates are give or take a few days because of the calendar. The third priest would take over the third priest would end his service on May the 12th. The fourth priest would end his service on around May the 19th. The fifth priest would end his service on around May the 26th. The sixth priest would end his service on right around June the 3rd. The seventh priest would end his service on around June the 10th. Now, we're up to June the 10th and we're at the end of the seventh priest. So now it's time for Abiah, which is the eighth priest, to take over his week of service. Abiah would take over sometime around June the 10th and he would end around the 17th. Let's read. Luke chapter 1 verse 5. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zachariah. Now that's John the Baptist's father before John the Baptist is born. Zachariah was of the course of Abiah. Now we're reading here that Zachariah is of the course of Abiah. So when this priest named Zachariah, which is John the Baptist's father, would serve in the temple, we know that his time of service was from June 10th through the 17th. Let's keep reading. Zachariah's wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blameless. Now it says right here that they followed all the commandments of God. And one of the commandments of God in First Chronicles chapter 24 was that whoever was of the course of Abiah, that he would serve in the 8th week. So we know that Zechariah is following that course. Okay, verse 7. But they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well advanced in years. So it was that while he was serving as priest before God in the order of his course, which is the course of Abiah. So we know Zechariah was serving in the temple right at his course, which is June 10 through the 17th. Verse 9. According to the custom of his priesthood, his lot fell to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. Every priest would do different things. Zechariah's lot was he used to burn incense. Verse 10. And the whole multitude of the people was praying outside at the door of incense. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zechariah saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said to him, Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer is heard. And your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. This is John the Baptist. Verse 14. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. He will also be filled with the Holy Spirit. Now this is a prophecy of that John is going to be filled with the Holy Spirit, and we all know that happened when Mary came to greet Elizabeth, his mother, while John was still in his womb. We read that from part 1 of this study. See, it says, and he will also be filled with the Holy Spirit even from his mother's womb. Verse 16. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God. He will also go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. I'm sorry, hold on a second. Yeah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. Now keep in mind, we just read that John was filled with the Holy Spirit while he was in his mother's womb. And we know, because we read in part 1 of this study, that in order to be filled with the Holy Spirit, you must be in the presence of God. So God's presence again was on this earth in Jesus Christ while before he was born. So Emmanuel is really not when Jesus was born. That's not Christmas. Christmas, Emmanuel, is when Jesus was actually in his mother's womb. That's what we're trying to read here. But let's find out the time that Jesus became in his mother's womb. Where was we? Let me find my place. Luke chapter 1 verse 17. And he will also go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. And Zacharias said to the angel, How shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife is well advanced in years. And the angel answered and said to him, I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and was sent to speak to you and bring you these glad tidings. But behold, you will be mute and not able to speak until the day of these things take place, the day that John is born. Because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their own time. And the people waited for Zechariah and marveled that he lingered so long in the temple. But when he came out of the temple, he could not speak to them. And they perceived that he had seen a vision in the temple, for he beckoned to them and remained speechless. Beckon means like hand signals, because he can't talk, so he's using hand signals. So, verse 23, so it was, as soon as the days of his service were completed. Now, Zechariah finished his service. He finished his whole week of service. As soon as the days of his service were completed, that he departed to his own house, he went back home. Verse 24. Now after those days his wife Elizabeth conceived, and she hid herself 5 months, saying, Thus the Lord has dealt with me in the days when he looked on me, to take away my reproach among people. Okay, now what are we getting to? Zechariah finished his service, which was June 10 through the 17th. So we know that Zechariah was in the temple June 10 through 17th. It would probably take him maybe, like, being an old man, it would take him maybe a day or so to actually get home. So John the Baptist was probably conceived around June the 19th. And we know that John was 6 months exactly older than Jesus. So if John was conceived June the 19th or the 20th, obviously 9 months later he would be born, which would make John's birthday in March, sometime March the 20th or March 21st, or some late March. And we know that Jesus is born 6 months after John. So Jesus was not born in December. Jesus was actually born in late September, which is the 9th month. So that means that lines up perfect that Jesus was conceived right around December the 25th. And he wasn't born on December 25th. He was conceived then. And that's what we should celebrate. Not Jesus' birth, but Jesus' conception.